Hello, Hamish here from mortgagesonline.co.nz, and I've got Miriam Bell with me today.
Hi.
From the New Zealand Property Investor, the editor of the New Zealand Property Investor magazine, which is a lovely magazine, Miriam.
Absolutely.
It's got some great
People
content.
should rush out and buy it right now.
Well, we're going to talk about the impending crash that's coming, or maybe
or
not
the possibility
coming.
of.
Well, I don't think it's coming, but some people think.
Some do.
Like this article here.
Yes, both Bloomberg and The Economist have recently speculated that New Zealand housing and rental prices are overvalued, which in many areas they probably are. But they sort of riff on that, if you like, to suggest that the New Zealand market is entering bubble territory, such as seen in countries like Ireland and the US before the GFC. And like you, Hamish, many local commentators don't actually agree for a number of reasons.
Yeah, well, the key thing with those articles is basically a look at rent ratio and income ratio, right? The issue I have with that is that a lot of this, when you look at it like New Zealand as a whole, what you miss sometimes is that Auckland is way bigger than most of the where New Zealanders live, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got Auckland here with about 1.5 million people, then you've got Christchurch, Wellington with around 400,000, then, Hamilton there with nearly half that, and then you've got a whole bunch of other towns where New Zealanders live, right? And if you look at the income to, this is just my gut feeling, but for not what I've been seeing, you can probably buy a house for 400 to 500 grand.
Yep, potentially, yeah.
In most towns in New Zealand.
In many, yeah.
Right.
And for less in many.
And for a family on about, say, about 80k income, I don't know, that ends up being, if you're taking a mortgage of about 450, you're paying about $4.95 per week or something, right?
Yeah.
Which is, it's not ideal, but hey, it's an investment, and it's still way less than, it's most of your income you still have to yourself.
Yeah, I agree, and I guess, as you say, that is in many parts of New Zealand, if not Auckland. That's why I think economists have talked quite a lot about the New Zealand property market really being a two-speed market.
Yep.
So you have Auckland on one hand and the rest of New Zealand on the other. And Auckland's cycle, as we've discussed, has peaked a few years ago, and since then it's been pretty flat, really.
Well,
bit of decline, but
let's face it, the Reserve Bank threw a lot at it to
did.
try and what would have, if you told an Australian a few years ago that you need a 40% deposit as an investor, they would just say, okay, that's a joke, your market's going to crash, but it didn't.
Yes, absolutely, and there's lots of differences there, but I think that it has led to a cooling of contributed to a cooling of the market, and in quite a measured fashion, I guess if that's the right word. We haven't seen the drops that the Sydney and Melbourne market have seen, and because they have an oversupply of some types of property and we have an undersupply of most, I think there's different conditions.
And I think supply is quite a key difference as well between us and some of these other countries, because building, we don't have a lot of options when it comes to building materials and things like that in the supply chain.
Yeah.
And some of these countries, they were building like crazy before the correction, right?
They were, and I think anybody who's followed the Kiwi Build saga would sort of appreciate that we don't really have a problem with overbuilding in New Zealand. Quite the reverse, we're struggling to build enough to tackle that shortage, and as I understand it, there's nobody really who thinks that equation is going to change anytime soon. I think you can see with consents that there's more construction going on, but as I understand it, the industry's pretty near capacity. Yeah,
in Auckland, definitely. It's not easy to get a builder or an architect or a structural engineer. But I think, and then of course, they also, when they talk about these articles about the impending doom, they also talk about house price to rent. And again, when you start to look outside Auckland, the yields aren't too bad. In fact, you're about to do an article next month, aren't you?
In our August issue, we have an article on the top 20 highest yield suburbs in New Zealand. they are suburbs which tend to be out of the main centres, and for investors that means there's a whole load of things they need to weigh up because potentially they're higher risk areas, but there can be no doubt that some of those yields are considerably higher than anywhere else you'd see in New Zealand, particularly Auckland. And if you do your research, think about things enough, they're worth a look at. Certainly there's some interesting things in the article which I hope people would be keen to read.
Well, look, thank you for watching. Hopefully that has been kind of interesting for you. And keep an eye out for the New Zealand Property Investor magazine.
Yes, rush out and buy it. I urge you.
And thank you for coming in, Miriam, and sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
Thanks.